Okay, so I believe we are live right now, everyone, on clickorlando.com, News 6 Plus. We're live on Facebook, on YouTube, all of our platforms, and we're here to give you the very latest, the brand new data just in on Tropical Storm Ian. This is as of the 11 o'clock advisory, and we haven't seen much change. The winds have stayed the same. The movement a little bit, it's moving west-northwest at 14 miles per hour, moving with winds at 50 miles per hour. It's moving in on the Grand Cayman Islands, well south, about 200 miles south of Jamaica. Now, here is the official track on this as we continue along here. Again, with the 11 o'clock track, this is a new track, but it hasn't changed since the 5 a.m. except for the intensity as we get to the end of the period here. So watch what happens. It shows it strengthening to a Category 1 hurricane, likely late today or tomorrow, and then rapidly intensifying to a Category 3 major hurricane as it approaches far western Cuba and then moves over Cuba and strengthens more to a Category 4 hurricane in the Gulf of Mexico by Tuesday. And then Wednesday, moving north, but weakening a bit back to a Category 2 and then possibly making a landfall as a Category 2 hurricane. There you go. And then that would happen on Wednesday late or early Thursday. So let's reiterate that. We're talking about 5 days out of a possible landfall of this hurricane. Earlier, the model data and the track looked about the same, but notice one thing: the cone has tightened up a little bit on the southern part here, as you see the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico, but the cone is still wide as we talked about that 5 day outlook. So still within the cone, we have one little sliver of far southern Osceola County now. This is a little change over the 5 a.m. advisory. The new track does exclude the far southern parts of Osceola County and then southern parts of Brevard County. The rest of Central Florida is still within the cone. Now, we are going to be answering some of your questions here. Donna Scott on Facebook, thank you very much. Titusville appreciates you. Thank you very much. Now, one thing I do want to say is it's still very early for us to be able to give direct impacts on direct areas. So, Donna, I just want to thank you for not asking for a specific impact. And the reason is this right here. When we show you the cone, just how wide it is, we're talking about 400 miles from one side of the cone to the other. And so from the center of that line, we're talking about 200 miles either way. And we have had questions with people wondering, well, if you can look at the storm now and see that it's about 400 miles wide on each side of the center of circulation, then why can't you predict that if it goes in that center line that there would be impacts and certain impacts? Well, the thing is, the stronger these storms get, the more tightly packed they get. The smaller they actually get, but they have stronger winds within them. So that's a possibility. With the last run, it was showing a major Category 3 at landfall near the Big Bend area or anywhere within this cone. So if it were to move all the way to the west of this cone, which is the far western sides of the Panhandle, that would be about 400 miles away from Orlando. And so if you've got a tightly packed storm, it could be a Category 3 at that point, but right now it's predicting a Category 2. Then the more tightly packed it is, because the stronger it is, then the less of an impact we would have in the Orlando or even along our western zones. Sumter and Marion would see a lower impact because of where it is. So what I'm saying is, because this cone is still so wide, it's hard to tell you impacts, because if it goes all the way to the west side of the cone, even if it is a couple of hundred miles wide, we would have very low impacts. If it goes to the other side, we would have major impacts. So it could go anywhere within this cone. We still have 5 days out. So anyway, I'm just going to go ahead and set that straight and now look at more questions, and hopefully that you don't ask for specific impacts. And you are. Chris, you're asking for Port Orange. You heard what I just said. Leesburg, Jonathan, you heard what I just said. So let's click over and see what they're saying on YouTube. I'm not seeing questions. All right, cool. So we'll just keep on with the Facebook folks. And again, we'll go through the presentation here. So if you're just tuned in, the very latest track does sort of weaken it at landfall, which would be on late Wednesday or early Thursday. So that line, that orange line where you see, would be the possible time of landfall, which could actually be Thursday. Wednesday, we could see some impacts. Let's reiterate that. Wednesday, we would see some impacts if it stays on this trajectory. But the problem is within this cone, because it's so wide, it's hard to pin down exactly what kind of impacts we would have. This is showing that it would make some sort of landfall possibly late Thursday into early Friday. So that's why I'm saying there's a 5-day period here that we have time to watch it at least. So here are the models, and the models again have been shifting to the west, and that is why the cone has shifted to the west. But if you're just tuned in, the brand new cone does not look much different, but it has slightly shifted west compared to the 5 a.m. cone. And again, because it's only excluding a tiny bit, the far southern sides of Osceola County and then the southern parts of Brevard County. So because it's excluding that, we are seeing a slight shift to the west. And that is in pretty much agreement with what these models are doing. So if the models continue to shift to the west, then the track will likely continue to shift to the west, which would be good news. And the reason, again, it's hard to pinpoint exact impacts is that the storm, if it is a strong storm, a Category 4 or even Category 3, it would be more tightly packed. And if it's on the far western sides of this cone, that would put it with an landfall in far western sides of the Panhandle, and that would be very low impacts on Central Florida. But if it goes to the other side of the cone, then we would have major impacts. So until this cone tightens up, we'll not have a good idea on direct impacts to Central Florida. But the timing, Wednesday, we could start to see some tropical storm force winds if this cone holds true. We could also see landfall somewhere late Thursday, early Friday, and you can see it right there. It shows 8 a.m. Friday with winds at 75 miles per hour, but that would possibly be after a landfall, possibly a landfall with a Category 2 wind up closer to 110 miles per hour, because early this morning at the 5 a.m. advisory, it was showing a possible landfall as a Category 3 major hurricane. And again, that center line goes right to the Big Bend of Florida, but it could again go all the way back to the west or all the way off to the east. These are the models, once again, showing just that. We have 5 minutes until the end of our dealio here. Let's see. Bring it on in. I'm in Dunellen. All right. Thank you very much, Avery, for that. People are comparing this storm to Charlie. What I want to say about that is that every storm is different, because oftentimes storms could either be not as strong and be pretty wide and not tightly packed, and so they can fan out and bring rain and wind gust and all of that to a much larger area than a stronger storm could be. Or the storm could weaken and, have a harder time making that trajectory that these models are showing. So even though this is actually a farther westerly movement than some of those storms that we had in 2004, a lot of folks want to compare to that when they see it moving generally in the same direction. Many times these storms can make a quick turn, they can wobble, so hard to know, again, 5 days out, if we're going to see it look like any storm that we've ever seen. So, that's hard to say, will it be like any other storm, because number one, they're always different, and number two, we're still 5 days out from some sort of landfall. Again, people are talking about specific areas. You've heard what I've said on that. So I'm just looking through some of the questions. There is some drier air, Ivan. We are seeing some drier air, but the thing is, it's starting to move out of that environment. That's one of the graphics I have coming up, is that where it moved yesterday, it was, here we go. This shows a lot of the heat and the moisture that is in the atmosphere where it's starting to move. So the heat potential is really going to be the fuel for this storm, and that's why it will rapidly intensify a little bit later today. We do expect it to intensify at least to a Category 1 hurricane, if not late today, definitely tomorrow, and then strengthen to a Category 3 before moving to Cuba. And look at that. The track does not bring it over much land. So it's going to be over water most of the time. It's going to be over very warm water, close to 90-degree water temperatures in the upper 80s, and it's moving out of that environment where we had those upper-level winds. So to answer some of your questions here about that, it's moving out of that less favorable environment and back into an environment that is more favorable. So we have less of those upper-level winds. We have a lot more warm water to work with, and not much land for it to move over. So it has all the potential to strengthen very quickly and stay strong the entire time. Okay, let's see. Other questions. Are we going to have wind and rain? Yeah, okay. So again, you've heard me say that we can't do specific impacts. So what I'm going to do is just keep going on through. This is going to warm up that warm water, the ocean water temperatures. As it moves into that warm water, it will fuel very quickly and it will strengthen. It will be pulled to the north by this. This is the steering pattern we're talking about. And this is the jet stream. This is what guides weather patterns across the world, the jet stream here. And it's going to dip. And then that large dip in the jet stream is going to help to pull this to the north. But depending on how far it dips, how strong it will be, there's still a lot of questions 4 or 5 days out as to how far to the west, how far to the east it could go. We know it's going to pull it to the north, but at what time? What's the timing going to be? And there is a front that will be a player in that. So still a front and this dip in the jet stream that will help to pull it up. A lot of questions on the exact timing because we're still 4 to 5 days out on what that could do. So it is still fairly unorganized, but much more organized than it was yesterday. Yesterday, most of the convection or storminess was on the left side of this storm. The center of circulation was here, and then on the left of it is where all the storminess is. If you tuned in at 5 o'clock this morning, now we're seeing more of a symmetrical, organized system where you see all of that moisture and energy wrapping around the entire system. So it is getting more organized than it was yesterday, but not quite as strong as it needs to be for those impacts to be more evident. So as we get into Monday, as it strengthens more and becomes a hurricane, those models will be in more agreement and we'll have a better idea of what's happening with the impacts on that. So we're going to show you some radar here real quick. We are going to see some rain move in today. We'll be updating you throughout the day and answering your questions, and we'll have a better idea on those impacts in the coming days.